Reince, good to see you yesterday. Thanks for being on this morning.
Happy to be on.
Are we going to have more of the same? Wall Street running Washington. How is this administration going to do what it set out to do, which was work for the little guy, for the people left out in the cold by a rigged system?
Well, first of all the people that President-elect Trump is bringing in all have his same mindset and his same goals, and that's what we're going to work together to try and do. But it all starts at the top, Mika. It starts with Donald Trump and President Trump and his willingness to get on the phone and to cut deals and to call people out and say, you know, you're not leaving to Mexico, you're staying here. I think you two know more than anyone that he doesn't, he doesn't sit around and wait for a scheduled phone call for 4:45 for 5 minutes to talk to the head of the UT. He just says, you know what, put him on the phone. I want to talk to him. That's what he does, and that's not typical of a president-elect. And I think that's what's so fresh about Donald Trump.
So, Reince, let me ask you, you know Wisconsin as well as anybody politically. You understand Donald Trump was the first Republican to win there since 1984, and that was a pretty remarkable thing. But he did it by talking about how he was going to change Washington and how he was going to be more populist than our party's been in the past. Do you think he can do that? Do you think he can push real reforms through a Republican Congress that may be fighting back, especially when you have people like Steve Mnuchin and other people that are creatures of Wall Street?
Well, Steve is going to be lockstep with the vision of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. I mean, there's just no question about it. They wouldn't be offered a position if they didn't follow suit with the exact things that Trump wanted. In fact, Steve Mnuchin was part of writing that 100-day plan and that speech that Donald Trump gave a few weeks ago about what the first 100 days would be like. And so as far as Wisconsin and winning Wisconsin, I think it all goes back to President Trump, which is, you know, people in this country can debate ideology all day long, but I always found that people in America were just starving for something real and authentic and genuine. People were tired of the plasticized Washington, D.C. people, and that's what Donald Trump brought. That's why he swept the Midwest, because people are starving for real, and that's what he brings.
We're going to have David Leonhardt on with the New York Times, wrote a great op-ed earlier this week saying Donald Trump can break from the Republican past, or he can be Big Marco, basically saying supersize the sort of economic policies that people like Marco Rubio and others have promoted for 30 years. Can you think of a particular policy that working class voters in Wisconsin are going to take heart in, to say, hey, wait a second, this is a new kind of Republican. This is not a guy who's just going to bow and scrape to Wall Street. Can you think of a policy right now?
Sure. I mean, I can think of trade policies. I can think of reformulating NAFTA. I can think of ways that we can create fair trade and making sure that the Chinese don't take advantage of us, and making sure the Mexican government doesn't take advantage of our businesses, and that reaching out to those businesses and telling people that before you leave these workers out in the cold, like what happened to our town in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Paul Ryan's town in Janesville, Wisconsin, when everything left and everything fell apart, that we're going to have a president that's willing to pick up the phone and say, not so fast. We're looking out for people going to work every day, and we don't care about Republican or Democrat. We care about the American worker. That's number one. Number two, I mean, straight up tax reform, lowering taxes for everyone, whether you're in a 20% bracket or you're in a 15% bracket or you're up in the 29 or 28, whatever it is, lowering those taxes is going to be important. And the last thing is Obamacare and health care. I mean, obviously, we have to repeal Obamacare, at least for the most part, but we have to replace it with something that's going to be more competitive at a lower cost. Those are all things that are going to be important to people in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania in order to take our country back. And so I think those are the things that people are looking for. Who's going to be the fighter for the American worker? And that's going to be Donald Trump.
Willie.
Hey, Chairman, it's Willie. It's good to see you this morning. Donald Trump making some news just within the last hour, tweeting out that he will be leaving, as he called them, my great businesses in total. He says he wants to in no way have a conflict of interest with my various businesses. He said that he's drafting papers that will, quote, take me completely out of business operations. So who will run his companies once that process is complete?
Hey, Willie, that'll all be worked out, but I think what you all need to see and the American people need to see is that we've got a president-elect who's taking this very seriously. This is not a you know, this is the first president we've had, at least in modern history, that's had so many successful businesses in so many diverse areas across the country, and in many cases retail and a hospitality business that is dependent on people's business. So it's not the easiest thing to work out, but you should know that he's got the best people in America working on it. And I think what you see in those tweets is a person at the top that understands and is willing and showing the American people that he's working hard on it and he's taking it seriously to make sure that we comply with all the rules and laws and regulations that are in place.
Right, Chairman.
Even though those rules and regulations don't actually contemplate a situation like this.
Well, it's a big deal what he does with the businesses. It's one thing to put it into a blind trust and truly to be disconnected from it, but it's an entirely different thing to turn it over to, say, Ivanka Trump or Don Jr. or Eric Trump and keep it family with people with whom obviously he will have constant contact, representing both his business and the White House. So do you think he'll turn it over to the family or put it into a blind trust?
I'm not ready to reveal any of that, Willie, but here's the thing. I mean, he was elected by the American people with all of this knowledge in mind. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, this is something that, in fact, was celebrated by the American people, that we wanted someone who understood business, who understood the tax code.
No, I don't think he should be ashamed, but it's just important what happens next. But I'm just saying, there's nothing
different today than there was 3 weeks ago. I mean, people in this country knew and accepted and celebrated this business that Donald Trump has built throughout his entire life. So now we're working on making sure that all those conflicts are taken care of and doing the best job we can, given the fact that the laws actually are very vague and don't contemplate this scenario, but we're doing the best we can for the American people.
You're confident one way or another he will separate himself from the businesses enough that the American public will see no conflict of interest between White House policy and the policies of his businesses.
That's right, and that's what we're working towards. You're right.
All right, so Reince, just back to the American worker. I'm curious, do you know what's going to happen with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, created by Elizabeth Warren under President Obama to protect Americans from being ripped off by big businesses, Wall Street, major mortgage companies? I mean, this is something that's in sync with his message and an important construct, but put together by the previous administration.
Well, we'll get to that, Mika, soon. I mean, obviously we're working through major cabinet positions now. There's going to be a second wave of reviews that we need to do at deputy secretary levels, ambassadors, consumer protection, all these things that you're talking about. But there's no. I would just say this: there's no preconceived position. That we're not taking some party line position on every single issue across the board. I mean, he wants to look out for the American consumer. He doesn't want people being taken advantage of, and he wants to make sure that everyone in America is protected. And I think you're going to see that same person that you saw on the campaign trail continue through the White House. And over time, I think you'll see that he is going to continue to try to be the champion of the American worker.
So let me ask you, Reince. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chief of Staff, how does a kid from Kenosha exactly eat frog's legs at Jean-Georges?
Oh,
I didn't eat any frog's legs, but I didn't go for that. Although I've tried them. Listen, I've tried them in the past, but I didn't go for the frog legs. So
so how did the other than that, how did the dinner go with Mitt Romney?
It went very well. I mean, obviously. There's a lot of respect, I think, for each other, and I think the relationship has built over time. They've talked many times on the phone. We had a good meeting in Bedminster last night. It was a lot of fun, and they talked a lot about foreign policy, but they also talked about the New England Patriots and Tom Brady, and we talked about sports, and we had a good time.
Was it a productive meeting?
There was a lot of laughs in the room.
Would you say that Donald Trump and Mitt Romney have a comfort level personally that would allow him to hold a position in the administration?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think it's getting to that point, but I would just caution that I don't think anything's imminent at this point. But certainly, what the people need to see, though, is President-elect Trump saying, "I'm going to talk to the best possible people in America and make the best decision I can." I mean, I talked to Rudy Giuliani, David Petraeus, Senator Corker, Mitt Romney, and many others. And I just think it should be encouraging to people that we've got a president that's willing to say, look, I don't really care about the past. I just want to make sure that the best decisions are made for the American people.
Yeah. Reince